Hello, I'm James Cridland, the radio futurologist, and I've been a little bit remiss in keeping this newsletter podcast feed up to date, but still, I promise I will get it up to date, kind of. This is from January the 28th. Is no news good news? And funding the BBC. And I started this particular newsletter by talking about the fact that I didn't have a home office, and that's why. Lisa Tarbuck wants to get rid of the news in the middle of her BBC Radio 2 show, which got Matt Deegan thinking about the news bulletins in radio. Now, Radio 2's news bulletins have always seemed to me like the land time forgot. They sound identical to the news bulletins that I remember when at the age of 6 I was being driven to school listening to Terry Wogan down some windy Somerset roads. The bulletins seem overly wordy and formal. Here's our political correspondent, Ian Watson. And you can see that they may not help maintain a feeling of energy and positivity on air. I'd also have a question about whether an hourly news bulletin is really required at 7 p.m. on a Saturday night, which is when Lisa Tarbuck is on. But I did go and have a listen to February the 22nd's bulletin, the bulletin prior to sending this particular newsletter out, which was nearly a minute of talking about blackmailing MPs, followed by about 20 seconds of a man charged with double murder, about 40 seconds of anti-vaccination protests, about 20 seconds of new COVID cases across the UK, 30 seconds worth of an Everton versus Aston Villa sports ball report, and finally, a UK skier winning a gold medal. Now, I'm not a radio journalist, but goodness, those stories are really long. 55 seconds on the top story of blackmail, 31 seconds on a sports ball game, which if you cared about, you'd be listening elsewhere anyway. And nothing particularly positive about from the sliding sport gold medal. Apparently, it's the first gold medal that a British sliding person has ever won in that competition. Go sliding. It's also nice to hear explicitly that the man charged with double murder was a foreigner. He was from Romania, which is the only fact about that person that we learnt. And we wonder why Brexit was a thing. Anyway, at The Pulse, my programme director at the time, Stephen Martin, used to rabbit on about the world of the pulse, to the news team, urging them to remember who's listening and what their shared interests are. And one of those people, because they all listened to the same radio station. Now, I gather that Clive Dickens at Absolute Radio also tried to shape the news bulletins a little, asking for news that accentuated positive elements of stories. I'm not quite sure how popular that was with the journalists. I am actually sure how popular it was. It wasn't. But I think that's quite possible. When I ran a local news website for a little while in the mid-2010s, I learnt that historic pub to close might be a bigger story for clicks, but award-winning Turkish restaurant to move into the Coach and Horses was actually rather more positive. In 2018, David Spencer spoke about radio news at Next Radio, and news consumption has changed, he said, but the style of radio news bulletins haven't, and there's probably something in that, I think. Elsewhere, some good reporting from the BBC. A BBC Newsround story about the Prime Minister's parties. Newsround, if you don't know, is the news service for children, one of those services that will be cut if the Conservative government have their way. You'll find this linked from my newsletter, which is at james.crid.land. If you go to updates and find the January 28th episode, you'll find all of these links. And you'll also find this link in the show notes. Also, I came up with a way of fully funding the BBC that doesn't involve advertising, is fairer to everyone, doesn't need to be paid for by the elderly or the unemployed, and maintains their level of funding. No, really. And it's all costed out too. I link to that too. Another casualty in the government spat with public service broadcasting is the Audio Content Fund, which has seen £3.3 million distributed to more than 80 indie production companies, and output has been aired on more than 340 different radio stations. It's very disappointing to see that going. Stupid Nadine Dorries watch. This particular week, she claimed that Tony Blair handed over to Gordon Brown in 2007, which was, quotes, pre-rolling 24-hour news. What Nadine Dorries doesn't know is that BBC News 24 launched in 1997, 10 years before that. Sky News launched in 1989, even earlier. And CNN launched in 1980. It's a good job she's not the UK minister in charge of the media, isn't it? Wait, she is? How? And if you think that a feature called A Guide to Your Local News Girl sounds pretty awful, you haven't read it. I linked to it from the TV Times in, astonishingly, 1980. Gosh, it's quite a thing. Let's click into it and read a little bit. Here's a little bit about Selina Scott from Grampian at the time. From Grampian Today. She joined Grampian in 1978 after working in journalism. A blonde. She is 5 foot 9 inches tall and single. Why on earth? Anyway, it turns out that if you have a good rant like I did last time about stupid Nadine Dorries, then it gets you lots of people buying you coffee, which is nice. John Kerno says that my stupid content had him laughing all afternoon. Paul Easton said that this newsletter was proof that I'm not stupid. A BBC employee who I'll not name thanks me for sharing the Public Alliance funding report, and Gavin Watson also bought me a coffee or 5. So thank you to everybody and to those who replied to my rant last time around, saying how much they enjoyed it. Thank you also to Richard Hilton, James Masterton and Brun Audio Consulting for your ongoing support of this newsletter. If you'd like to support my work in any way, you can buy me a coffee, become a member to give regularly, or just give a one-off coffee or 5. I link as to where to do that in my show notes and the newsletter today, or frankly, it's just buymeacoffee.com/James Cridland. I'm not even sure why I'm telling you that. And if you're using a new podcast app, you can also press the boost button. Go on, press the boost button. My professional website has more details about who I am and what I do and whether I can help you further. And I'm delighted to be speaking again. I'll be at Podcast Movement Evolutions in Los Angeles in March, Radio Days Europe in Malmö in Sweden in May. Malmö. The podcast show in London in May, and Canadian Music Week in June, and more details of all of that soon. Until then, keep listening.